Hi there, it's time to get up to scratch. Today, we're going to look at the operator blocks, the green colored blocks over here. Many people don't know what they do, but they are extremely powerful and can help your program manipulate numbers and words. They interact very well with both the control blocks, which you should have learned about in a previous video, and the variables, which I'll discuss in the next video. Let's begin having a look. The first set of operators are actually the four basic operators that you would use in maths class. So we've got addition, we've got subtraction, we've got multiplication, and here if you aren't familiar with how computers use multiplication, it's actually the asterisk, which if you're typing that in, it's Shift 8, and we've got division. Now, these blocks can do lots of little things. So the most simple thing, let's use the when green flag click block and a looks block to show us how these all work. If I put the numbers in these blocks 1 plus 2, and so I put this in here, it is actually going to say 3 for 2 seconds. I can do the same thing with different numbers, so I could do 5 minus 3 and try that one out. 2, and so on and so forth. So just to give you an example, 3 times 7. And why don't we try a decimal number in here just to see what happens? So let's try 10.5 divided by, let's say, 7. And what does that give us? It gives us 1.50. Now, this might not be the most exciting thing to do when you've got numbers there, but when you've got things like these answer blocks, so what if I said, let's say, tell me a number, and then I'm going to multiply that number by 3. So tell me a number, let's do 5, and the answer should be 15. So any of those other circular blocks that we've touched about, so any of the ones in the sensing blocks, in I believe there's the volume and the sound, there's a few in the looks at the bottom, and there are some in the motion, I believe. The X position, the Y position, and the direction. So any of those numbers can go in those blocks. So you can start to see how you can create some really interesting things. Let's get rid of some of these things right now and move on to the next set of blocks, or next block, I guess, which is a pick random from 1 to 10. So sometimes you want something to be random. You don't want it to be going to the same place at every time. So you can pick, let's do pick random from 1 to 10 and see what that does. So that is very similar. Each time you press the button, you're going to get a different number, likely. Sometimes there's a chance that you might get the same number back to back. You can also use this for example in any of these blocks that have the circle in them. So that's how that could be useful. Now the next few bits of blocks have the diamond shape. So we've got some comparative operators up here, and we've got some logical operators here. So I'm going to keep that in there just to help us determine if the conditions are being met, and then I'm going to use a if then block. And instead of saying hello, I'll say, as I did in another video, it worked. So the first operator is the greater than. And actually, let's bring a control operator in here as a forever, because that will make this a little more interesting, so we don't just have to check one time. And let's go look at the sensing blocks and get the mouse of x is greater than 50. So x, as you remember, will go along this way, and 0 is probably right in the middle where the cat is, so 50 is probably somewhere over here. So let's try pressing the green button and seeing what happens as I slowly move the cursor. And there we go, that's about where 50 is. You could also do, instead of using mouse X, you could use lots of other things in there, so maybe the loudness. is greater than 50. And let's stop it and restart the program. Oh, and my voice is pretty loud as it is. So I guess that's 50% maybe. Let's see what happens if I need to make it 100%. So what happens? Can I talk really loudly and it's going to work? No, 100 is clearly pretty loud. We can also do if something is less than. So if I make note that they can actually go into each other, it looks like. So if the loudness is less than 50, it's going to come on. So that's going to be pretty much all the time. That might not be the best number. Note too that if these two blocks essentially are the same thing, you can just swap them around. So if I had the loudness over 50, the 50 is less than the loudness, it's the same as the loudness being greater than 50. The last one is if something is equal to another number. So if I put 49 in there is equal to 50, it's not going to do anything. But if I change that number to 50, it's the same thing. This works really well, actually, if you want to check if people are correct in a question. So what you can do is you can ask a question. What is 20 plus 30? And instead of 50 equaling 50, I'm going to put the answer. The answer equals 50. You are correct. Let's even make this a little bit more interesting. Instead of doing the if block, we'll use the if then else block and duplicate that. Instead of saying you are correct, you are wrong. But now you're starting to see how these if else blocks and these operator blocks can work together. So if I put the right answer in, it is going to go to correct. If I put something else that is not 50, it's going to go and say that I am wrong. So let's test out both options. Let's stop and start that again just to make sure it's the right thing. And let's try 50 and see if I am correct. You are correct. And then let's play that program again. And this time I'll put the wrong answer, 49. And it says you are wrong. So these are really kind of necessary when you are using a lot of those control blocks with the diamond shape in them. The next three are the logical operators, the and, or not. And you could probably do a whole math course on how these three can relate to each other. Just know that if we had, say, if the answer is 50 and the loudness is greater than 50, then it will come back as true and perform the action below. So we need to bring in a bunch of other of those blocks for this to work. If the loudness is greater than 50, so I'm going to have to make sure that I am loud when I am answering this question. And what is 10 plus 40? I'll use the hum. That's pretty good. Correct. So I try this and I'm speaking nice and really loudly, and let's see if it works. Oh, I guess I wasn't speaking too loudly. So both of those conditions in an and have to be met. If you want to have one or the other conditions be met, you could use an or block. So I can put those two things in there. So that means that either the answer is going to be exactly 50 or the loudness is greater than 50. So let's see if I can play around with this. If I put the right answer and I'm really quiet and I don't say anything, it gives me correct. And if I put the wrong answer, but I'm being really loud, it still says that I'm correct. The opposite, and I think I mentioned this in another video, is that let's say we want to mess with people. We would say the answer is not that reverses that. So this is looking for, remember when I talked in the video about control blocks that if something in here is true, well, this is saying if it's not this. So it's kind of the negative version of a truth. So you can put one of those in there. And if I put, for example, if I put the correct answer in now 50, it's saying, which means I'm not correct. Let's move on to these ones, these operator blocks that tend to work with words. And this can be very interesting. So before, remember when I said if you ask someone what their name was and they couldn't join things together, this first one actually does just that. So we could say hello and then their name. And I'm doing this purposely making a mistake just so that you can see how it works. So what's your name? My name is there. And it says hello, Michael, but without a space. So what's really interesting is the computer doesn't know to put spaces in. So when you're using the join, you often have to put that extra little space. I'm not even sure you saw me do that. Let's try it again. Ask me what my name is, and then there you see the spaces in there. So that join can be really good. And just to make that even more interesting, you can nest these. And I've had some programs where they're nested almost infinitely. So because my answer is there, it doesn't have a space at the end. I'm going to type a space first. Don't know if you saw me do that. And then I'm going to ask myself a question. And so I put it in. And now you can see that I should have put a full stop there, actually. Let's do that to make it look a little bit better. Right, so when you're doing this, you probably want to test out your program to see if it's looking exactly like you want it to. Things can get pretty wide. You can also find the specific letter of any kind of word. So again, I'll put this in, and if I type my name, it's going to give me back the first letter. If I can change that, it should give me back an I this time. Okay, so this can determine the specific letter of a name or a word, and that can be quite useful when you're trying to work with words. This next one also will give you the length of a word or the length of a string, I guess. So when you're working with variables, you'll either work with strings, which are words, or numbers, which are obviously numbers. So in this case, it's going to give me the length of my name, which I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me right, is 7. So sometimes it can help you figure out what is the longest word. Now, when you're using these, your programs might be really complicated. When you're just trying these out, you might not really find a use for them at the beginning, but know they're there and know that you can use them, because you might have a problem one day and you're like, oh, how do I do this? And then think, I've used the length of block that we've got there. The next one is a diamond shaped block again. So it's checking to see if something contains an A in this case, but you could put anything in there, and we're going to play around with this a little bit. I'm just going to use the if then block this time, and I'm going to say, I could be really fancy here. Is the join one that I want? So that can show you if something does contain it. Now, these last few are some interesting mathematical operations. So I need to explain what they are. Some of them are pretty straightforward. Some of them I'm not going to explain. So the first one here is mod. This one, when I learned what it was, I thought, I'll never use it, but it's actually quite a useful one. It basically means what is the remainder when you divide one number by another. Now, so for example, if I put the same number in there, so if I put 5 and 5, if I divide 5 by 5, it'll be 1 remainder 0. So it's going to give me 0. Now, if I put a 6 in there, it's going to be 1 remainder 1. So I get 1. So if I put lots of numbers in here, let's see how quickly you can do your math. 172 divided by 8, and it's saying the remainder is 4. The next one here is you can round a number. So 0.5 goes up to 1, 0.49 should go down to 0. So if you need to round a number to get rid of the decimals, that might be useful to help clean up your data when you got it. Now this last one, I'm not going to go through it. This could be years and years of math classes, but it will tell you lots of different things. So I believe ABS is absolute value, floor, ceiling, square root, sine, cos, tan, and lots of other things down there. So if you're trying to do some really intricate mathematical operations, there are quite a lot here for you to use. That's all the operator blocks. They are some of the most important pieces of any Scratch program and can really work together well with some other blocks to make your programs very powerful. We've got one more set of blocks to look at, the variables. These will almost complete your knowledge of the Scratch blocks until you check out the bonus videos that explain a few more details. Until next time, happy programming! Don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.